Gunshot. Ethan falls, blood streaming from his shoulder. Blackwood turns his guns toward Grace, finger tightening on the trigger. "Your turn." But then Ethan rises, blood pouring down his arm, good hand raising his rifle, aims, fires. Blackwood looks down at the hole in his chest, tries to raise his guns one last time. Ethan fires again. Blackwood falls. 1876, Black Hills, Dakota Territory. This is the story of a man who buried his past, until a promise forced him to fight one more time. The year was 1876. Ethan Wade was 36 years old. 5 years had passed since he buried Anne and little Rose beside the Republican River. 5 years of living alone on the Black Hills, avoiding people like they carried plague. He had buried the best part of himself with them. The man who knew how to laugh, the man who could hope, the man who believed in tomorrow. That man died when cholera took his family while he was 300 miles away fighting a war that did not matter. But on that night in Brennan's saloon in Deadwood, Ethan witnessed something that forced him to choose. Continue dying slowly in the mountains, or live again. One more time. The saloon reeked of whiskey, sweat, and urine. Smoke hung thick in the air like a gray curtain. Men crowded around tables lit by oil lamps that threw dancing shadows on the walls. Their voices rose and fell in rhythms of greed and cruelty. This was Deadwood. This was the edge of civilization where the law was whatever a man with a gun said it was. Ethan had come to sell furs and buy ammunition. His plan was simple: get in, get out. Be back in the mountains before dawn. He wanted nothing to do with people. People brought complications. Complications brought pain. But then he saw her. Grace Hartley stood in the corner near the back wall. She was 26 years old. Her gray eyes were steady despite the fear Ethan could see swimming just beneath the surface. Her auburn hair was pulled back tight. Her hands were folded in front of her, but he noticed they were trembling slightly. She wore a simple dark dress. No jewelry. No pretense. It was not her beauty that made Ethan stop. It was the look in her eyes. She was deciding something in that moment. Fight or die. Those were the only two choices left to her. Ethan recognized that look. He had seen it in the mirror every day for 5 years. $300, Victor Brennan said from his seat at the center table. His voice was thick and wet like oil sliding over gravel. "That is what your husband owed when he died, Mrs. Hartley. $300 is a lot of money." Brennan was a heavy man in his 50s. His face was red and bloated from years of drinking. His small eyes gleamed with something that made Ethan's stomach turn. This was a man who enjoyed power, who enjoyed watching people squirm. "I do not have $300, Grace said. Her voice was steady. Ethan noticed that. She did not beg, did not cry, just stated the fact. "No," Brennan agreed. "You do not. Which brings us to the matter of payment." The men around the table laughed. It was an ugly sound, the kind of laughter that comes before violence or worse. Clayton Hartley leaned forward from his position at Brennan's right hand. He was Grace's brother-in-law, Thomas Hartley's younger brother, a thin man with a weak chin and eyes that would not meet hers. "Family takes care of family, Grace. You understand that." "I understand that I owe nothing," Grace said. "Thomas borrowed that money, not me." "But Thomas is dead," Brennan said. He tapped the table with his thick fingers. "And in Dakota Territory, a widow's debts pass to family, which means your dear brother-in-law here is responsible, unless—" He let the word hang in the air. Everyone knew what came next. "Unless she pays another way," Clayton finished. His voice was eager, too eager. Grace's jaw tightened. That was the only sign of emotion Ethan saw. Her back remained straight. Her eyes did not drop. She did not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. "You have 2 weeks, Mrs. Hartley," Brennan said. 2 weeks to find $300, or you pay what you owe the way women have always paid their debts." More laughter. Louder now. Men leaning back in their chairs, some licking their lips, already imagining. Ethan felt something crack open inside his chest. It was a door that had been locked for 5 years, a door he thought he had sealed shut forever. but it was opening now whether he wanted it to or not. "Walk away," a voice in his head said. "This is not your fight. You buried that man who saves people. You buried him next to Anne and Rose, but Ethan could not move, could not turn, could not leave, because he remembered. He remembered Anne begging him not to re-enlist, saying she had a bad feeling, saying, "Please, Ethan, please stay." And he had gone anyway, told her it was his duty, told her he would protect her by fighting 300 miles away. He came back to 2 graves and a burned cabin where cholera had swept through the valley like the wrath of God. He had failed Anne, failed Rose, failed to be there when they needed him most. But this woman, this Grace Hartley standing in the corner with her trembling hands and her steady eyes, she was here, right now, right in front of him. Ethan Wade took a step forward, then another. The saloon fell quiet as men noticed him moving. Brennan looked up. His eyes narrowed as he took in Ethan's appearance. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing buckskin and carrying a rifle that looked well used and well maintained. A man from the mountains. A man who lived alone for a reason. "This does not concern you, friend," Brennan said. Ethan did not answer. He walked past the table, walked to where Maggie Crawford stood near the stairs. Maggie owned the boarding house where Grace rented a room. She was in her mid-40s, a widow herself. She had kind eyes and the look of someone who had seen too much cruelty and still chose to be kind anyway. "Who is she?" Ethan asked quietly. Maggie glanced at Grace, then back at Ethan. "Grace Hartley. Her husband Thomas died 3 months ago in a mine collapse, left her with nothing but debts." "The debt real?" Maggie's expression darkened. "Thomas never borrowed more than $50 in his life, but Brennan's books say 300, and in Deadwood Brennan's books are law." "What happens if she cannot pay?" "What do you think happens?" Maggie's voice was bitter. "Brennan already has a buyer lined up. Some mine owner up in Helena who wants a wife. Brennan gets his cut. Clayton gets out of debt. And Grace—" She did not finish. She did not need to. Ethan looked back at Grace. She was still standing there, still not crying, still not begging, but her hands were shaking harder now. She knew what was coming. She was just trying to decide if she would run or fight. Ethan made his decision. "I need to speak with her," he said. Maggie's eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid," Ethan said. "Probably." He walked out of the saloon into the cold night air. He did not look back at Grace, did not acknowledge Brennan or Clayton or any of the other men. He just walked out and stood in the street breathing the clean air and looking up at the stars. The stars looked the same as they did over his cabin in the Black Hills, the same as they looked the night Anne died, the same as they would look the night he died. But maybe, just maybe, they could look different if he tried. Ethan waited. An hour later there was a knock on the door of Maggie's boarding house. Ethan stood on the porch, hat in hand. His rifle was slung over his shoulder. The night was cold enough that his breath came out in white clouds. Maggie opened the door. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "She is upstairs, second door on the left. I will be right here if she needs me." It was not a threat, just a statement of fact. Ethan respected her for it. He climbed the narrow stairs. The wood creaked under his boots. He could hear voices from other rooms, a baby crying, someone coughing, the sounds of too many people living too close together. He stopped at the second door, paused. What was he doing? He was a man who lived alone on a mountain because he could not stand to be around people anymore. What made him think he could help this woman? But he knocked anyway. "Come in," Grace's voice said. Ethan opened the door. The room was small. A bed, a chair, a cracked mirror on the wall, a single lamp burning low. Grace sat on the edge of the bed. In her hands was a small bag. She was packing. She looked up when Ethan entered. Her eyes went to the rifle on his shoulder, then to his face. She did not smile, did not look afraid, just waited. "Ma'am," Ethan said, "I have a proposition that might sound unusual." "If Brennan sent you, I am not interested," Grace said. "He did not send me." "Then who are you?" My name is Ethan Wade. I live 15 miles up in the Black Hills. I need someone to cook and mend through the winter, someone I can trust." Grace stood up slowly. Her hand moved toward the small knife she had tucked in her belt. Ethan noticed but did not react. Good, he thought. She knows how to protect herself. "And what would this arrangement cost me?" Grace asked. "I will pay your debt to Brennan, all $300. You work for me for 1 year, cooking, mending, keeping the cabin." "And what else would I be expected to give?" Ethan looked her straight in the eyes. "Nothing. You would have your own room, your own space. I am not looking for a wife. I am not looking for anything except someone who can cook beans without burning them and sew buttons so they do not fall off." Grace studied him. Ethan could see her mind working, calculating, trying to figure out the angle, trying to see where the trap was hidden. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you need out of Deadwood, and I need help I can trust." "How do I know I can trust you?" Ethan reached into his coat. Grace tensed. Her hand went to the knife. But Ethan moved slowly. He pulled out a Colt .45 revolver, checked that it was loaded, then he turned it around and held it out to her grip first. "Take this," he said. Grace stared at the gun. "What?" "Take it. Keep it. If I break my word at any point, you shoot me." "You are giving me a loaded gun." "Yes." "Why?" "Because a man's word should mean something," Ethan said. "If my word is not enough, then you need protection. So take the gun. Keep it under your pillow. Keep it on you at all times. And if I lie to you, if I try anything, you do not agree to use it." Grace took the gun slowly. It was heavy in her hands. She looked at it, then at Ethan, then back at the gun. "You could die for this," she said quietly. "Yes." "That does not bother you?" "Dying for keeping my word." Ethan shook his head. "That is a better death than most men get. Better than dying because you were too coward to help someone when you could." Grace sat down on the bed again. The gun rested in her lap. She was silent for a long time. Ethan did not rush her. He just stood there, hat in hand, and waited. Finally she looked up. "I have one condition," Grace said. "What is it?" "After 1 year I leave, free and clear, no arguments, no attempts to keep me there." "Agreed." "And you put that in writing." Ethan pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Grace took it, unfolded it, read it by the lamplight. It was a simple contract, room and board in exchange for cooking and mending. 1-year term. At the end, Grace Hartley would leave with no debts, no obligations, and $300 paid on her behalf. The handwriting was neat and careful. Most men in Deadwood could barely sign their names. This man could write a legal document. "You can read?" Grace asked. "And write. My mother was a schoolteacher back in Ohio." Grace read the contract again, looking for tricks, looking for loopholes. But it was exactly what Ethan said. Simple, clear, honest. "Why are you really doing this?" Grace asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. 5 years ago, I had a wife and a daughter, Anne and Rose. I left them to fight in the Sioux campaigns. Told Anne I was doing my duty, protecting her by fighting." He paused. The memory was a knife in his chest even after all this time. "Cholera came through while I was gone. Killed them both in 3 days. By the time I got home, they had been buried for 2 weeks. I was 300 miles away doing my duty while my family died." Grace's expression softened slightly. "I cannot fix that," Ethan continued. "I cannot bring them back, but I can stop one more woman from being hurt when I am standing right there watching it happen. So that is why. Not because I want anything from you, because I owe a debt I can never repay." Grace looked at the contract again, then at the gun in her lap, then at Ethan's face. She was trying to read him, trying to see if this was real or just another kind of trap. But all she saw in his eyes was grief and determination, and something that looked almost like hope. "All right," Grace said. "We have a deal." Ethan nodded. He did not smile, did not reach out to shake her hand, just nodded once and turned to leave. "Mr. Wade," Grace said. He stopped, looked back. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Do not thank me yet. Winter in the mountains is hard. You might hate me before spring comes. I will take my chances." After Ethan left, Grace sat on the bed holding the gun and the contract. Maggie knocked softly and came in. "Are you sure about this?" Maggie asked. "No," Grace said honestly, "but I am sure about what happens if I stay here, so I would rather take my chances with a stranger on a mountain than wait for Brennan to sell me like livestock." Maggie sat beside her, put an arm around her shoulders. "You are braver than you know." Grace shook her head. "I am not brave. I am just out of options." Sometimes that is the same thing. The next morning, Ethan walked into Brennan's saloon. The place smelled worse in daylight, stale beer and old vomit and the sweat of men who did not bathe enough. Brennan sat at his usual table counting money from the night before. Clayton Hartley was there too, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He straightened when he saw Ethan enter. Ethan walked to the table, set his rifle down carefully within reach. Then he pulled out a leather pouch and poured $300 in gold coins onto the table. The coins clinked and rattled. The sound filled the quiet saloon. Brennan stared at the money, then at Ethan. "What is this payment for Grace Hartley's debt?" Brennan's eyes narrowed. "You are buying her contract. I am paying what she owes. She works for me now." Clayton pushed off from the wall. "Now wait just a minute. Grace is family. You cannot just—" "I can," Ethan said. He did not raise his voice, did not have to. "You want the money or not?" Brennan picked up one of the coins, bit it, tested its weight. Real gold. He counted slowly, deliberately, making Ethan wait, asserting what little power he had left in this transaction. "300, Brennan said finally. "That covers the original debt, but there is interest and fees. The total is $500. Ethan went very still. "The contract says 300. "The contract says 300 plus interest and administrative fees. You need to read the fine print." "Show me." Brennan pulled out a ledger, pointed to a line of cramped handwriting at the bottom. It was barely legible, almost designed to be missed. Ethan leaned closer and read it. His jaw tightened. It was a scam, a clear, obvious scam. But Brennan knew most people could not read well enough to catch it. And even if they could, who would they complain to? The law in Deadwood was whatever men like Brennan said it was. Ethan looked up from the ledger. His pale blue eyes locked on Brennan's face. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet, very calm, the kind of calm that comes right before violence. "If I read this contract and find that you are lying," Ethan said, "I will come back, not to pay you, to settle accounts." Brennan shifted in his chair. "Are you threatening me?" "Yes." The word hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Brennan looked at Ethan's face, at his hands resting on the table, at the rifle within easy reach. He had seen men like this before, men who lived hard lives in hard places, men who did not make threats they were not willing to follow through on. Brennan swallowed. 300 is fine. I thought it might be. Brennan swept the coins into his cash box, closed the lid with a thud. But Clayton here is right. Grace is family. And I do not think he is going to let this go so easy. Clayton stepped forward. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip. "Grace is my responsibility now. My brother's widow. That makes her family property." "She is not property," Ethan said. "The law says different." "Then the law is wrong." Clayton's face flushed red. "You cannot just waltz in here and take what belongs to my family." Ethan picked up his rifle, slow and easy, not pointing it at anyone, just holding it. "She does not belong to anyone, not anymore." "We will see about that," Clayton said. "We will see what happens when you are alone up in those mountains with no one around to protect you." Ethan looked at Clayton for a long moment. The younger man tried to hold his gaze but could not. His eyes dropped after a few seconds. "Come visit any time," Ethan said quietly. "I will be home." He walked out of the saloon, did not look back, did not hurry, just walked out into the morning sun like a man who had done what he came to do and had no regrets. But he knew this was not over. Men like Clayton did not let go of things easily, especially when money was involved, especially when their pride was wounded. Ethan would have to be ready. Grace waited outside Maggie's boarding house with her small bag of belongings. Everything she owned in the world fit into one canvas bag. A few dresses, a coat, some undergarments, a small Bible that had belonged to her mother. That was it. Ethan arrived leading 2 horses, a gray gelding for himself and a stubborn-looking mule for Grace. "You ride?" he asked. "Not well. Thomas and I never had horses." "The mule will be gentle. Just hold on and let him follow mine." Ethan helped Grace mount. His hands on her waist were brief and impersonal. As soon as she was settled, he stepped back, giving her space, respecting the invisible boundary between them. Maggie came out to say goodbye. She hugged Grace tight. "You send word if you need anything at all." "I will." "And you," Maggie said to Ethan, "you keep your word." "I will." They rode out of Deadwood as the sun climbed higher. Grace looked back once at the town, at the muddy streets and the crooked buildings and the place where she had been a widow with no future. Then she turned forward and did not look back again. The trail led up into the hills. Pine trees grew thick on either side. The air was clean and cold. Grace breathed it in and realized she had not taken a deep breath in months. In Deadwood the air always smelled like smoke and filth. Here it smelled like pine sap and earth and the promise of snow. They rode for 2 hours in silence. Ethan did not try to make conversation. Grace was grateful for that. She needed time to think, to process what she had just agreed to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Finally, Ethan stopped at a small creek. The water ran clear over smooth stones. He dismounted and led his horse to drink. Then he cupped his hands and drank himself. Only after he had swallowed did he fill his canteen and offer it to Grace. She realized what he was doing, showing her the water was safe, drinking it first so she would know it was not poisoned or fouled. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Grace drank. The water was cold and sweet and tasted like freedom. "We will stop here for a bit," Ethan said. "Let the animals rest." He did not tell Grace what to do, did not order her around, just stated a fact and then busied himself checking the horses' hooves and adjusting the packs. Grace sat on a fallen log and watched him work. His movements were efficient and practiced. No wasted motion. The actions of a man who had done these things 1,000 times. "How long have you lived in the mountains?" she asked. 5 years. "Alone the whole time?" "Yes." "That must be lonely." Ethan did not answer right away. He finished checking the mule's feet before he spoke. "Lonely is easier than the alternative." "What alternative?" "Caring about people who die." Grace was quiet. She understood that. After Thomas died, she had felt the same way. It was easier to be numb, easier to not let anyone close, easier to build walls and live inside them where nothing could hurt you. But was it really living, or just waiting to die? "I am sorry about your wife and daughter," Grace said. Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly, but he did not turn around. "Thank you. Can I ask what they were like?" For a long moment Ethan did not answer. Grace thought maybe she had crossed a line, but then he spoke. His voice was soft, almost like he was talking to himself more than to her. Anne was from Kentucky. She had a voice like honey, used to sing while she cooked. It drove me crazy at first, too loud, too cheerful in the morning. But then I was gone for 6 months, and all I could think about was hearing her sing again. He paused, took a breath, continued. "Rose was 5 when she died. She loved catching butterflies, used to make me help her build traps out of sticks and string. They never worked, but she would spend hours trying anyway. She called me Papa Bear because I was big and grumpy in the mornings." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. He stopped talking, bent down and pretended to adjust something on the saddle that did not need adjusting. Grace blinked back tears. Not for herself. For him. for the weight he carried, for the guilt that probably woke him up every night. Thomas was a dreamer, Grace said quietly. He thought every mine had gold in it. Every claim was going to make us rich. I loved him, but not the way he loved me. And I never told him that, never said the words he needed to hear. Now I cannot. Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, and in his eyes she saw understanding. They were both carrying the same burden, regret, the weight of words unspoken and chances missed. Regret is the heaviest load, Ethan said. Yes, Grace agreed. It is. They sat in silence for a while longer. The creek babbled over the stones. A bird called from somewhere in the trees. The world kept turning despite their grief. Finally, Ethan stood. We should move on. Want to reach the cabin before dark. They mounted up again and continued riding. But something had shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, but recognition. Two people who understood each other's pain without needing to explain it. By late afternoon, Ethan pointed to a spot off the trail. We will camp here tonight. Cabin is still 4 hours away, and I do not want to arrive in the dark. He chose the location carefully. A clearing with their backs to a rock face, good sightlines to the trail, a small stream nearby for water. Grace watched as Ethan unpacked with military precision. First he built 2 fires, one near where Grace would sleep, one 20 feet away where he would sleep. Why 2 fires? Grace asked. So you have warmth and privacy, and so I can keep watch without disturbing you. He built a simple shelter for Grace using pine branches and a canvas tarp. Then he showed her how to arrange her bedroll to stay warm, how to keep her boots close in case she needed to move quickly, how to position herself so she could see the trail. You are very careful, Grace observed. Staying alive requires being careful. Ethan cooked dinner over his fire, beans and salt pork. Simple food, but well prepared. He set Grace's portion on a flat rock near her fire. Then he took his own and retreated to his fire on the other side of the clearing. They ate in silence. Grace noticed that Ethan always positioned himself where he could see the trail. His rifle was never more than an arm's length away. He was constantly scanning, listening, watching. "Are you expecting trouble?" Grace asked. "Always expect trouble. That way you are ready when it comes." "Has it come often?" "Often enough." Grace studied him across the space between the fires. He was a hard man, that much was obvious, shaped by violence and loss into something that could survive in places where softer men would break. But he was not cruel. Not the way Clayton was cruel. Not the way Brennan was cruel. His hardness was like armor, protection against a world that had hurt him. But underneath, she sensed something else, something still capable of kindness even if he had tried to bury it. "Why did you really help me, Mr. Wade?" Grace asked. Ethan poked at his fire with a stick, watched the sparks rise into the darkness. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, like they cost him something to say. "I told you, my wife and daughter died while I was gone. But what I did not tell you is that I had a choice. Anne begged me not to re-enlist. She said she had a bad feeling, said, 'Please, Ethan, please stay with us.'" He paused. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. "I told her I had a duty, that I was protecting her by going to fight. I thought I was being honorable, doing the right thing. But all I did was abandon her when she needed me most. And when I came back and saw those graves, I knew I would carry that for the rest of my life." Grace waited. She could feel there was more. "I cannot fix what I did," Ethan continued. "Cannot bring them back. Cannot tell Anne I was wrong. But when I saw you standing in that saloon, I knew I had a choice again. Walk away like I did before, or stay. Stand up. Be there for someone who needed help." He looked at Grace then. His eyes reflected the firelight. "So that is why. Not because I want anything from you, not because I am some kind of hero, but because maybe if I can help one person when it matters, it will balance the scales just a little bit. Maybe it will make the weight easier to carry." Grace felt tears sting her eyes. She understood now. This was not about her, not really. This was about a man trying to atone for a sin he did not actually commit, trying to forgive himself for something that was not his fault. "It was not your fault they died," Grace said gently. "I know, but knowing and believing are different things." They sat in silence after that. The fires burned low. Stars came out overhead, bright and cold and infinite. Grace lay down on her bedroll and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Across the clearing, Ethan sat with his back against a tree, his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. "Mr. Wade," Grace said, "you can sleep. I can keep watch for a while." Ethan looked at her in surprise. "You know how?" "No, but you could teach me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked over to her fire. He crouched down and spoke quietly, showing her what to listen for. "Hear that?" he asked. Grace listened. She could hear the wind in the trees, the creek, small rustlings in the underbrush. "Animals moving close sound different than animals far away," Ethan explained. "Close you hear the leaves crunching, twigs breaking. Far away, just the wind carrying the sound." He taught her to watch the shadows, how they shifted when something moved, how to use her peripheral vision because it caught movement better than looking straight at something. "Fire ruins your night vision," he said. "So look past the fire, into the darkness beyond. Let your eyes adjust." He taught her about the wind, how to tell direction, how predators moved upwind so their scent would not give them away. "Your gun is the last resort," Ethan said. "Your brain is your first weapon. See the danger before it sees you." Grace listened carefully, memorized every word. This was survival knowledge, the kind of thing that could save her life. When Ethan was done, he returned to his spot across the clearing. "Wake me in 2 hours, or if you see anything that does not feel right." "How will I know what does not feel right?" "You will know." Ethan lay down. Within minutes his breathing evened out. He was asleep, trusting her to watch, trusting her to wake him if needed. It was the first time in 5 years that Ethan Wade had slept without keeping one eye open. The first time he had trusted someone enough to let his guard down. And it was the first time in months that Grace Hartley felt like she had a purpose. She was not just a widow waiting to be sold. She was a person someone trusted, someone who could be relied on. She sat by the fire and kept watch. 2 hours later she woke Ethan as promised. He sat up immediately, alert and ready. "Anything?" he asked. "All quiet. Like you said." Ethan nodded. "You did good." Those 3 words meant more to Grace than he could know. They reached the cabin just after noon the next day. It sat in a clearing surrounded by pine trees, 2 rooms built from thick logs, a stone fireplace with smoke stains darkening the chimney. The roof was solid and well maintained. The windows had real glass instead of oiled paper. This was not a temporary shelter. This was a home built to last. Grace dismounted and looked around. The clearing had been carved from the forest with care. Stumps cut low to the ground, wood stacked neatly in cords, a small shed for animals, a root cellar dug into the hillside. "You built all this?" Grace asked. "Ann and I built it together," Ethan said. "Rose helped pick the stones for the fireplace." He tied the horses and opened the cabin door. It creaked on leather hinges. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Dust covered everything. It looked like no one had been inside in months. "I have been staying in the shed mostly," Ethan said. "Could not bring myself to sleep in here." Grace understood. This was where his family had lived, where they had been happy. Coming back inside would mean facing all those memories. Ethan showed her the 2 rooms. The main room had the fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, and shelves for supplies. The second room was smaller, a bed, a chest, drawings on the wall made by a child's hand, a small wooden doll on the bed. "This was Rose's room," Ethan said. His voice was tight. "It is bigger than mine. You should take it." "Mr. Wade, I cannot—" "Take it," he said firmly. "I insist." Grace looked around the room, at the drawings, at the doll, at the love that had been poured into making this space for a little girl. "I will leave everything as it is," Grace said, "if that is all right with you." Ethan's jaw worked. He nodded once. then turned and walked out quickly. Grace heard the sound of an axe biting into wood, hard, fast, violent. He was chopping wood because he could not chop away the grief. She understood that too. Grace unpacked her few belongings. She arranged them neatly in a corner where they would not disturb Rose's things. Then she went to the main room and started a fire, found the broom and swept the floors, shook out the blankets, made the place livable again. By evening the cabin felt warmer, not just from the fire, but from being occupied again, from having life inside its walls. Ethan came in carrying an armload of wood. He stopped when he saw what Grace had done. The floors were clean, the table was set, the fire was burning bright. "Smells good," he said. "Just coffee and biscuits. I will do better tomorrow when I know where everything is." They ate dinner in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who do not need to fill every moment with words. After dinner, Ethan stood. "I will be in the shed if you need anything. Door bars from the inside. Use it." "Where will you sleep?" "The shed is fine, has a stove and a bedroll." "Mr. Wade," Grace said, "you do not need to sleep outside. This is your home. You need privacy, and you need to feel safe. That is more important than where I sleep." He walked to the door, paused. "For what it is worth, Mrs. Hartley, I am glad you are here. The cabin feels like a home again." Then he was gone. The door closed behind him. Grace heard his footsteps crossing to the shed. She barred the door as he had instructed. Then she sat in Rose's room and looked at the drawings on the wall. Children playing, animals, a stick figure family holding hands. Grace pulled out the Colt .45 that Ethan had given her. It was still loaded, still ready, but she did not think she would need it. Not here, not with this man who slept in a shed to make her feel safe. For the first time in months, Grace Hartley closed her eyes and slept without fear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles. A hard winter was coming, but tonight she was safe, she was warm, and she was free. November came to the Black Hills like a fist closing around the world. The temperature dropped. Snow began to fall. Not the gentle snow of autumn, but the hard, biting snow that meant winter had arrived and would not leave until spring. Ethan woke at 5 every morning. Grace could hear him moving around outside, the sound of the axe splitting wood, the creak of the shed door, his boots crunching through the snow as he checked the traps in the perimeter. By the time Grace had coffee ready, Ethan would appear at the cabin door. He would knock twice, wait for her to say "come in." Then he would enter and hang his coat by the fire to dry. They fell into a routine without discussing it. Grace cooked breakfast, biscuits when she could, cornmeal mush when supplies were low, bacon or salt pork, eggs when the chickens were laying, coffee always. Ethan ate quickly and efficiently. No wasted motion. He would thank her. Then he would go back outside to continue his work, chopping more wood, checking the animals, making repairs before the deep snows came. Grace cleaned the cabin, washed clothes in the stream while the water was still running, mended tears in shirts and pants, organized the supplies in the root cellar, made inventories of what they had and what they would need. In the afternoons, Ethan taught her. The first lesson was shooting. He brought out Anne's rifle. It was lighter than his, better sized for Grace's smaller frame. He showed her how to hold it, how to check if it was loaded, how to clean it properly. "A gun is just a tool," Ethan said, "like an axe or a hammer. It does what you tell it to do, nothing more, nothing less." They practiced with targets, pieces of wood set up at various distances. Ethan stood behind Grace and adjusted her stance. "Feet shoulder-width apart," he said. "Weight forward slightly. Not too much or you will lose balance when it kicks." His hands on her shoulders were brief, professional. As soon as she was positioned correctly, he stepped back, always maintaining that invisible boundary between them. "Breathe in," Ethan instructed. "Let half of it out, hold, then squeeze the trigger. Do not pull, squeeze, like you are gripping something gently." Grace fired. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The shot went wide, hitting a tree 10 feet to the left of the target. "Again," Ethan said. She fired again, Closer this time. By the end of the week, Grace could hit the target 3 times out of 5. By the end of the second week, she was hitting it consistently. Ethan nodded with approval. Good. Anne would have liked you. It was the first time he had compared Grace to his wife. Grace was not sure how to feel about that. Honored, uncomfortable. Both. The second lesson was hunting. Ethan woke Grace before dawn. The world was still dark and cold. Frost covered everything like a blanket of diamonds. "We are going after deer," Ethan said. "They feed at dawn. We need to be in position before the sun comes up." They walked through the forest in silence. Ethan showed Grace how to read tracks, the shape of the hoof print, the depth, how fresh the scat was, which way the animal was moving. "See how the edges of this track are sharp," Ethan whispered. "That means it is recent, maybe an hour old. If the edges were rounded and the track was filled with frost, it would be from yesterday or before." He showed her how to move quietly, stepping on the balls of her feet, avoiding dry branches, moving with the wind so their scent would not carry to the animals. They waited for 2 hours in the cold. Grace's fingers went numb despite her gloves. Her feet ached. But she did not complain, did not move, just waited like Ethan waited. Finally a deer appeared, a young doe. She stepped carefully into the clearing, her head up, her ears swiveling, alert for danger. Ethan slowly raised his rifle, took aim. His breathing was so controlled that Grace could barely hear it. The shot cracked through the morning air. The deer dropped instantly. One clean kill. "Always make it quick," Ethan said. "The animal deserves that much respect." He taught Grace how to field dress the kill, how to make the cuts, how to remove the organs without contaminating the meat, how to skin the hide so it could be used for leather. It was hard work, bloody work. But Grace did not shy away from it. She did what needed to be done. "You are stronger than you look," Ethan observed. "I have had to be." They carried the meat back to the cabin. Ethan showed Grace how to butcher the different cuts, how to preserve some by smoking, how to salt others, how to use every part of the animal so nothing was wasted. "This meat will last us a month if we are careful," Ethan said. "Maybe longer." The third lesson was winterizing the cabin. They worked together to seal every gap in the walls, mixing clay with moss and animal hair to create chinking that would keep out the wind, stacking firewood in cords against the cabin wall. At least 4 cords, maybe 5. Ethan said winter in the Black Hills could last 6 months and you could never have too much wood. They dug deeper into the root cellar, stored potatoes and turnips and carrots in sand to keep them from freezing, hung dried herbs from the rafters, filled barrels with clean snow that would melt for water when the streams froze. "Preparation is the difference between living and dying up here," Ethan said. "If you wait until you need something, it is already too late." Grace learned quickly. She had a good memory and strong hands. Within a month, she could do most of the daily tasks without Ethan's supervision. She could shoot well enough to hunt small game. She could read weather signs in the clouds and the way the animals behaved. She could start a fire in wind and rain. Ethan watched her progress with quiet approval. She was not a burden, not someone he had to constantly watch over. She was becoming a partner, someone he could rely on. That realization should have made things easier, but instead, it complicated everything. The grizzly tracks appeared in mid-November. Ethan found them near the stream. Big prints, bigger than any bear tracks he had seen in years. A male, probably 600 or 700 pounds. He followed the tracks back toward the cabin. His heart sank when he saw where they led. The bear had circled the cabin, tested the doors, scratched at the walls. It was looking for a place to den up for the winter, and it had chosen their cabin. Ethan returned to find Grace hanging laundry on a line strung between 2 trees. The day was cold but clear. A good day for drying clothes before the deep snows came. "We have a problem," Ethan said. Grace looked at his face and immediately put down the shirt she was holding. "What kind of problem?" "Grizzly. Big one. It has been checking out the cabin." Grace's face went pale. She knew what that meant. Grizzlies were dangerous any time of year. But a bear looking for a den was especially aggressive. It would fight to defend what it considered its territory. "What do we do?" Grace asked. "We make it not want to be here." Ethan spent the next 3 days building defenses. He constructed a secondary fence around the cabin using sharpened stakes. He set up an alarm system made from tin cans strung on wire. Anything that touched the wire would make noise. It would not stop a determined bear, but it would warn them. He showed Grace what to do if the bear came while he was away. "First get to the loft," Ethan said. He pointed to the ladder that led to the small storage area under the roof. "Height is your advantage. Bears can climb, but they are slow and awkward going up." He handed her 2 torches soaked in pitch. "Light these if the bear gets close. Throw them at its face. Bears hate fire. It might drive it off. And if it does not—" Ethan looked at her seriously. "Then you shoot. Aim for the face, the chest if you get a broadside shot. Do not shoot unless it is charging. You only have so many bullets, and a wounded bear is more dangerous than an unwounded one." Grace nodded. Her hands were steady as she took the torches. "What if you are not here?" "You do exactly what I just said. Do not try to be a hero. Your job is to survive until I get back." That night Ethan did not sleep in the shed. He stayed in the main room of the cabin, sitting in a chair by the door with his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. Grace lay in Rose's room and listened to the sounds of the night, the wind in the trees, the creak of branches, the settling of the cabin as the temperature dropped. Around 11, the alarm bells rang. Ethan was on his feet instantly. "Get to the loft, now!" Grace grabbed her rifle and climbed the ladder. From up high she could see the whole main room, the door, the windows, Ethan standing ready with his rifle. The bells rang again, closer this time. Then they heard it, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the very walls, the sound of something massive moving through the darkness, claws scraping on wood. The bear hit the door. The whole cabin shook. The bar across the door held, but the wood groaned under the impact. Ethan did not fire, not yet. Ammunition was precious, and a shot that did not kill would only enrage the bear. The scratching continued. The bear was testing the door, looking for a way in. Grace's hands trembled as she held her rifle. She remembered Ethan's instructions. Breathe, aim, wait for a clean shot. The bear circled the cabin. Grace could track its movement by the sound, around the back, along the side, testing the windows, the walls, looking for weakness. Ethan moved to the window, slowly, carefully. He peered out into the darkness. The bear was massive. Even in the dim moonlight, Ethan could see its size. 700 pounds, maybe more. Its fur was dark and matted. Its eyes reflected the light like coins. The bear reared up on its hind legs, towered over the cabin, roared a challenge that shook snow from the roof. Ethan raised his rifle, took aim through the window. His finger rested on the trigger, but he did not fire. "Why are you not shooting?" Grace whispered from the loft. "Because if I only wound it, it will tear this cabin apart getting to us." The bear dropped back to all fours. It circled once more. Then it stopped at the door, sat down, waiting. Ethan and Grace waited too. Minutes stretched like hours. The bear did not move, did not attack, just sat there in the cold staring at the door. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bear stood. It looked at the cabin one more time. Then it turned and lumbered off into the forest. Ethan did not relax. He stayed at the window, watching, making sure it was really gone. An hour passed. 2. The forest was silent except for the wind. "I think it left," Grace said quietly. "For now." Ethan agreed. "But it will be back. It wants this place." Grace climbed down from the loft. Her legs were shaky. Her heart was still pounding. "What do we do?" "We stay ready, and we hope it finds somewhere else to den." But 2 nights later the bear returned. This time Ethan was not at the cabin. He had gone to check his trap lines. A 2-hour trip. He had told Grace he would be back before dark, but the bear came at sunset. Grace was making dinner when she heard the alarm bells. Her blood went cold. She looked at the door, the windows, grabbed her rifle and the torches Ethan had prepared. The growl came low and deep, closer than last time. Grace ran to the loft, climbed up and positioned herself where she could see the door. She lit both torches. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. The bear hit the door. Hard, the wood cracked, the bar held but barely. Grace's hands shook. She remembered Ethan's words, "Do not shoot unless it is charging. You only get one chance." The bear hit the door again. This time the bar splintered. The door flew open. Cold air rushed in along with the smell of the bear, wet fur, old meat, wild musk. The bear filled the doorway. Its massive head swung back and forth. Its eyes found Grace in the loft. She threw the first torch. It arced through the air and hit the floor near the bear's front paws. The animal jerked back, growled, but did not run. Grace threw the second torch. This one landed closer. The flames caught on the bear's fur. It roared and shook itself. The fire went out, but the bear backed up a step. It was working. Ethan was right. The bear hated the fire. Grace grabbed her rifle, sighted down the barrel. The bear was 5 feet from the door. If it charged now, she would have one shot, maybe two if she was fast. The bear stepped forward, then stopped, sniffed the air. Its ears swiveled. Grace heard it too, the sound of a horse approaching fast. Ethan's gelding. He was coming back. The bear heard it, turned its massive head toward the sound. For a moment it seemed to weigh its options, fight or retreat. Ethan burst into the clearing. He took in the scene in an instant. The broken door, the torches burning on the floor, Grace in the loft with her rifle, the bear deciding whether to attack or run. Ethan fired a shot into the air. The crack echoed through the trees. The bear flinched, backed up another step. Ethan fired again. This shot hit the ground near the bear's feet. Dirt and snow exploded upward. The bear made its decision. It turned and ran, crashed through the underbrush and disappeared into the darkness. Ethan dismounted, ran to the cabin. "Grace, are you hurt?" "No, I did what you said. The torches worked." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, saw her standing there in the loft with the rifle in her hands and the torches burning at her feet. She had not panicked, had not frozen, had done exactly what needed to be done. "You did good," Ethan said. "You did real good." Grace climbed down from the loft. Her legs finally gave out when she reached the floor. Ethan caught her, held her steady. "I was so scared," Grace said. "Being scared is smart. Being scared kept you alive. What if it comes back? We will be ready." Ethan spent the next day reinforcing the door, adding more bars, building a secondary barrier. The bear did not return that night, or the next. After a week, Ethan found its tracks heading away from the cabin, north, toward a cave system he knew about. The bear had found another place to den, but something had changed between Ethan and Grace. He no longer saw her as someone he needed to protect. She had protected herself, had shown courage under pressure, had earned his respect in a way that went beyond the contract they had signed. And Grace looked at Ethan differently too. She had seen him ride back when she needed him, had seen him put himself between her and danger without hesitation. This was not a man doing his duty. This was a man who cared whether she lived or died. The walls between them were beginning to crack. December brought the first real snows. They fell thick and heavy. By mid-month, the world outside the cabin was buried under 3 feet of white. The temperature dropped to 10 below zero at night. The creek froze solid. The only sounds were the wind and the occasional crack of trees splitting in the cold. Ethan moved back into the cabin. There was no point pretending anymore. The shed was too cold for sleeping, and they both knew he could be trusted. He slept in the main room near the fire. Grace kept Rose's room, but the distance between them was shrinking. They ate meals together now, sat at the same table, talked while they ate instead of maintaining silence. Ethan told stories about his childhood in Ohio, about his mother who taught school, his father who was a blacksmith, the brother who died of fever when Ethan was 12. "That is when I learned the world is not fair," Ethan said. "My brother was good, better than me in every way, but he died and I lived. There is no reason for it, No grand plan, just chance. Grace talked about growing up in Missouri, about her parents who died when she was young, about the aunt who raised her and taught her to cook and sew and manage a household. She told me to marry for security, Grace said, to find a man with prospects and a steady income. When I married Thomas, she was so disappointed, said I was throwing my life away on a dreamer. Was she right? Grace thought about it. Thomas was a good man. He treated me well, never raised his hand to me, but he was always chasing the next big thing, the next mine, the next claim, and I spent my whole marriage worrying about money. Do you regret it? No. But I wonder what would have happened if I had made a different choice, if I had listened to my aunt and married someone practical instead of someone I loved. Would you have been happy? I do not know. Is anyone truly happy, or do we just get used to whatever life we have? Ethan did not have an answer for that. The intimacy grew in small ways, not romantic, not yet, but comfortable, familiar. Grace mended Ethan's shirts. She noticed the bullet-hole scar in the fabric where something had torn through near his shoulder. She did not ask about it, just sewed it closed and added a patch to reinforce the area. Ethan taught Grace how to sharpen knives properly, how to use a whetstone, the angle of the blade, the rhythm of the strokes. Anne used to do this, Ethan said without thinking. Then he froze, realizing he had mentioned his wife in a context that felt too intimate. But Grace did not flinch, did not make it awkward, just nodded. She taught you well. One evening Grace was humming while she cooked. It was an old hymn her mother used to sing. She did not realize she was doing it until Ethan spoke. Anne used to sing while she cooked, he said quietly. Grace stopped. I am sorry. I did not mean to. No. Ethan interrupted. Do not stop. It is good. The cabin feels more alive when there is music in it. Grace continued humming. Ethan closed his eyes and listened. For the first time in 5 years, he let himself remember Anne, not with pain, but with something that almost felt like peace. Maybe he could heal, maybe not completely, but enough. At night they sat by the fire and talked about everything and nothing, plans for spring, what crops to plant in the garden, whether they should get more chickens, small domestic details that made the future feel real instead of theoretical. Ethan told Grace about the war, not the battles, but the waiting, the boredom, the fear that came in quiet moments when you had too much time to think. The worst part was not knowing, Ethan said. Not knowing if Anne was safe, if Rose was healthy, if they were eating well. Every letter took weeks to arrive, and by the time I read it, everything could have changed. Did you get many letters? Not as many as I should have, Anne wrote, but the mail was unreliable. Some letters made it through, some did not. He paused, stared into the fire. The last letter I got from her was dated 2 weeks before she died. She said Rose had a cough, but it was getting better. She said she loved me. She said to come home safe. His voice cracked. I read that letter every day for a year. Like if I read it enough times I could change what happened. Like I could will them back to life through sheer stubbornness. Grace reached across the space between them, rested her hand on his, just for a moment, just to say, I understand. I see your pain. Ethan looked at their hands, then at her face. Something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. Then Grace pulled her hand back. The moment ended, but its echo remained. In late December, a trapper named Samuel arrived. He was an old man who ran a trapline that stretched from Deadwood to Hill City. He stopped at cabins along the way, delivered mail, shared news, traded for supplies. Ethan knew him well. They had done business before. Samuel was honest, reliable, one of the few men Ethan trusted. Got a letter for Mrs. Hartley, Samuel said. He pulled an envelope from his pack and handed it to Grace. Grace's face went pale when she saw the handwriting. It is from Clayton. Samuel noticed her reaction. You want me to stay while you read it? No, Grace said, but thank you. After Samuel left, Grace sat at the table and stared at the letter. Her hands were shaking. Do you want me to read it first? Ethan asked. Grace shook her head. She opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Her eyes moved across the words. Ethan watched her face go from pale to white to something that looked like fury. When she finished, she handed the letter to Ethan without a word. He read it aloud. Grace, I hope this finds you well. I write with unfortunate news. Victor Brennan has sold your contract to Mr. Harrison Blackwood of Helena Territory. Mr. Blackwood paid $800, a substantial sum for a woman. According to Dakota Territory law, you remain bound to Thomas's estate, which means bound to me as his heir. I will arrive in March to collect you. This is a family obligation. You understand? Clayton. Ethan read it twice, making sure he understood every word. Then he set the letter down carefully. His jaw was tight. His hands were clenched into fists. He cannot do this, Grace said. Her voice was shaking. You paid my debt. I am free. He claims the law says otherwise. What law? What gives him the right to sell me like livestock? Ethan stood, paced to the window, looked out at the snow-covered mountains. We need to check, find out if what he is saying is true. And if it is? Ethan turned to face her. His eyes were hard. Then we fight it, with law if we can, without law if we have to. Grace stood as well. I will not go with him. I would rather die. You are not going to die, and you are not going with him. I promise you that. You cannot promise that. If the law says, then damn the law, Ethan said. His voice was steel. I gave you my word. You work here for a year and then you are free. I do not break my word. Not for Clayton, not for Blackwood, not for anyone. Grace looked at him, saw the determination in his face, the absolute refusal to back down. This was a man who had failed to protect his family once. He would not fail again. What do we do? Grace asked. Tomorrow we ride to Hill City, talk to a lawyer, find out what the law actually says. If Clayton has a legal claim, we find a way to break it. If he does not, we make sure he knows coming after you will be the last mistake he makes. That night, Grace could not sleep. She lay in Rose's bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Clayton, about Blackwood, about the possibility that after everything she might still end up as property sold from one man to another. At 2 a.m, she could not take it anymore. She got up and walked to the main room. Ethan was sitting by the fire. He had not gone to bed either. Cannot sleep, he asked. No. No. Grace sat in the chair across from him. They stared into the fire together. The flames danced and crackled. Outside the wind howled. What if Clayton is right? Grace asked quietly. What if the law says I have to go? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but absolutely certain. 5 years ago, I was not there when the people I loved needed me, he said. I will not let that happen again, whatever it takes, whatever the cost. You are not going back to Clayton or Blackwood or anyone else. That might mean breaking the law. Then I break the law. You could go to jail, or worse. I could, but I will not, because I will make sure that if it comes to that, I deal with the problem permanently. Grace understood what he meant. He would kill Clayton if he had to, would kill Blackwood, would kill anyone who tried to take her. It should have frightened her. This man promising violence on her behalf. But instead she felt safe, protected. Like for the first time in her life, someone was willing to stand between her and the world. Thank you, Grace whispered. Do not thank me yet. We have a long fight ahead. They sat in silence after that, watching the fire burn low. Neither of them slept that night. They just sat together in the darkness and prepared for the war they knew was coming. They rode to Hill City the next morning. The trip took most of the day. The lawyer's name was Samuel Price. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers. He listened to their story, read Clayton's letter, frowned. Dakota Territory law regarding widows is complicated, Price said. If the husband had debts when he died, those debts can pass to his estate, which means to his heir, which would be Clayton. But I paid the debt, Ethan said. You paid Brennan. But if Brennan then sold the contract to Blackwood, the question becomes whether that sale was legal, and whether Grace's obligation transferred with it. "That is insane," Grace said. "That is the law," Price replied. "Or at least it might be. The courts have not ruled definitively on this exact situation." "So what do we do?" Ethan asked. "We gather evidence, marriage certificate, records of the original debt, witness statements. If we can prove the debt was fraudulent or that Brennan had no right to sell the contract, we can fight this. And if we cannot prove it," Price looked at them seriously, "then legally Grace may have to honor the contract. Unless what?" Price lowered his voice. "Unless Clayton never makes it to collect. But that is not legal advice, just an observation." Ethan nodded slowly. He understood. They left Hill City with a plan: gather evidence, build a case, and if that failed, be prepared to solve the problem another way. On the ride back, the sky changed. Clouds rolled in fast. The temperature dropped. Ethan looked up and his expression darkened. "Storm coming? A big one." They were still 2 hours from the cabin. Ethan urged the horses faster, but the snow started falling before they were halfway home. Within an hour it was a full blizzard. The wind howled. Visibility dropped to a few feet. The cold was brutal. They made it to the cabin just as darkness fell. Ethan quickly got the horses into the shed. Grace started a fire. They had made it. Barely. The storm raged for 3 days. On the third day, Ethan said he needed to check the trap line. It was dangerous, but if animals were caught in the traps, they would freeze and the pelts would be ruined. "I will be back before dark," Ethan said, but he was not. Darkness fell. The wind kept howling. Grace paced the cabin, kept the fire burning high, watched the door, waiting. Midnight came. No Ethan. By dawn, Grace could not wait any more. She bundled up in every warm piece of clothing she owned, took a rope and tied one end to the cabin door. The other end she tied around her waist. Then she went out into the storm. The cold hit her like a wall. The wind tried to push her down. Snow blinded her. But she kept moving, following the direction Ethan had gone, looking for any sign. She found him an hour later, half buried in a snowdrift, unconscious. Ice clung to his beard and eyelashes. His lips were blue. His skin felt like ice. "Ethan!" Grace screamed over the wind. "Ethan, wake up!" He did not respond. Grace knew she had to move fast. She grabbed him under the arms and started dragging. He was heavy, 200 pounds of dead weight, but she did not stop, could not stop. She followed the rope back to the cabin, pulled him inch by inch through the snow. It took her almost an hour to get him inside. By the time she did, her arms felt like they would fall off. But she did not rest. She stripped off his frozen clothes, wrapped him in every blanket in the cabin, built the fire so high the room was sweltering. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She climbed under the blankets with him, pressed her body against his, shared her warmth, her heat, her life. Hours passed. Grace did not move, did not sleep, just held him and willed him to live. Finally, just before dawn, Ethan opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Grace's face, tear-streaked, exhausted, beautiful. "Grace," he whispered. She kissed him, desperate, fierce, pouring all her fear and relief into that single act. Ethan was too weak to respond at first, but then his arms came up around her, held her close. When the kiss ended, they stayed pressed together, forehead to forehead, breathing the same air. "I thought I lost you," Grace said. Her voice was breaking. "I am here. I am all right." "No, you are not. You almost died." "But I did not, because of you." Grace pulled back slightly, looked at his face. "Why did you go out there? You knew it was dangerous. Had to check the traps. We need those pelts. We do not need them more than I need you alive." Ethan went still. "What did you say?" "I need you alive, Ethan. Do you understand that I need you?" "Grace, the contract." "Damn the contract," Grace said. Her voice was stronger now, certain. "I am not here because of a contract. I am not here because I owe you. I am here because when I thought you were dead, I realized something." "What?" "I cannot remember my life before you, And I do not want to. I do not want to go back to being that woman in Brennan's saloon. That woman who was just waiting to die. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me hope. You gave me myself back." Ethan's hands came up to cup her face. "I am not a good man, Grace. I have done things, killed people, made mistakes. I do not care about that. I care about who you are now, the man who gave me a gun to protect myself, the man who teaches me to hunt and shoot and survive, the man who keeps his word even when it costs him. I failed my family. You did not fail them. You loved them, and they died. That is not failure. That is just the cruelty of the world." Ethan's eyes were wet. "I do not deserve this. Do not deserve you. Maybe not. But you have me anyway." They held each other as the storm raged outside, and in that moment the contract did not matter. The debt did not matter. Clayton and Blackwood and the whole cruel world did not matter. All that mattered was two people who had found each other in the darkness, two wounded souls learning to be whole again. "Stay with me," Ethan whispered. "Not because of the contract, but because you want to." "I want to," Grace said. "God help me, I want to." They fell asleep in each other's arms. The storm passed. Morning came. And when they woke, everything had changed. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered. Something had shifted between Ethan and Grace. The careful distance they had maintained was gone. They moved around the cabin now like two people who belonged together, who fit. But there was no time to explore what that meant, because Clayton was coming. Ethan knew it in his bones. Men like Clayton did not give up when money was involved. He would come in March, just like his letter said, and he would not come alone. "We have 8 weeks, Ethan said one morning. "Maybe less if he decides to come early. We use that time to prepare." Grace looked up from the bread she was kneading. "Prepare how?" "I am going to teach you to fight." The training started the next day. Not just shooting practice anymore, real combat training, the kind that kept you alive when things went bad. Ethan showed Grace how to use a knife. Not for cooking, for killing. "Forget everything you think you know about fighting," Ethan said. "Men are bigger than you, stronger. If you try to match strength against strength, you lose, so you do not fight fair. You fight to win." He demonstrated holds and breaks, where to cut to disable someone fast, tendons in the wrist, the artery in the thigh, the soft spots under the ribs. "You do not stab," Ethan said. "You slash, across, like this. Aim for anything that bleeds." Grace practiced on a rolled-up blanket that Ethan hung from a tree, over and over. Slash, retreat, slash again. Her hands learned the motions. Her body learned the rhythm. After a week she could move without thinking, muscle memory taking over. They worked on hand-to-hand fighting. Ethan was careful not to hurt her, but he did not go easy either. He showed her how to use an attacker's weight against them, how to go for the eyes, the throat, the groin. "Men will not expect you to fight dirty," Ethan said. "Use that. Be vicious, be fast, and do not stop until they are down." Grace threw herself into the training. She was not naturally violent, but she understood what was coming. Clayton would not ask nicely. He would take what he wanted, unless she was ready to stop him. They drilled with rifles, moving targets now, shooting from cover, reloading under pressure. Ethan timed her, made her faster, pushed her until her hands could reload without looking, until she could chamber a round by feel alone. "In a fight, you will be scared," Ethan said. "Your hands will shake. Your breath will come too fast. You need to train so hard that your body knows what to do even when your mind is panicking." They worked on tactics. Ethan drew maps of the cabin in the dirt, showed Grace the best defensive positions, where to shoot from, where to take cover, how to move between positions without exposing herself. "If they come during the day, we use the windows," Ethan explained. "If they come at night, we use the loft. Height gives us advantage." He showed her the escape routes, the tunnel from the root cellar that led into the woods, the cache of supplies hidden 200 yards from the cabin, food, water, ammunition, enough to survive for a week if they had to abandon the cabin and hide. "If things go bad," Ethan said, "if they overrun the cabin, you go through the tunnel. You do not look back. You do not wait for me. You run and you hide until it is safe." "I am not leaving you," Grace said. "You will if I tell you to." "No. We stand together or we fall together." Ethan looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes. He knew better than to argue. Grace had changed from the frightened widow he had met in Deadwood. She was steel now, tempered by hardship into something that would not break. "All right," Ethan said. "Together." By the end of February, Grace was as ready as she would ever be. She could shoot, fight, reload, move tactically. She was not a soldier, but she was not helpless either. Ethan watched her practice one morning, hitting targets at 100 yards, smooth, confident, deadly. "Anne would have liked you," he thought, "not just because you are strong, but because you are good, and strength means nothing without goodness." In early March, Ethan and Grace made the trip to Deadwood. They needed evidence, witnesses, anything that could prove Clayton had no legal claim. Maggie Crawford welcomed them into her boarding house. She had aged in the months since Grace left. New lines around her eyes, more gray in her hair, the weight of witnessing too much suffering. But her eyes lit up when she saw Grace. "Look at you," Maggie said. "You are different. Different how? Stronger, like you found something worth fighting for." Maggie had been busy. She had gathered 8 women, all widows or wives of dead men, all victims of Brennan's schemes. They met in Maggie's parlor. Mary Thompson was there. Her husband's $50 debt had become $500 in Brennan's ledger. Elizabeth Morton, whose husband had borrowed $30 for medical supplies and ended up owing $300. One by one they told their stories. The pattern was always the same: small debt. Then Brennan would show forged documents claiming the debt was 10 times larger. If the husband died, the widow was responsible. And if she could not pay, Brennan had a buyer waiting. "How many women?" Grace asked. "At least 15 that I know of," Maggie said. "Maybe more. Brennan has been running this scheme for 5 years." Ethan listened carefully. His face was carved from stone. This was worse than he thought. Not just a crime against Grace, a systematic exploitation of vulnerable women across the territory. "Do you have proof?" Ethan asked. Maggie pulled out a worn leather ledger. "I found this hidden in Brennan's office. It is his real books, the ones he keeps for himself. Look at Thomas Hartley's entry." Ethan opened the ledger, ran his finger down the page until he found the name. Thomas Hartley. Original debt, $30. Recorded as $300. Next to it in Brennan's handwriting, sold contract to HB for $800. Commission $400. HB. Harrison Blackwood. "This proves Brennan was lying," Grace said. "It proves more than that," Ethan said quietly. "Look at the other names. Look at the pattern." Grace looked, saw 12 other women's names, each one with a similar story. Small debt inflated, contract sold, commission taken. "This is slavery," Grace whispered. "He is buying and selling people." "Exactly," Maggie said, "which is why we have to stop him. Not just for you, for all of us." They spent the next 2 days gathering statements, getting women to agree to testify, building a case that even a corrupt court would have trouble ignoring. Sheriff Miller met with them reluctantly. He was a thin man with nervous eyes. He knew Brennan had connections, knew challenging him was dangerous. But when Ethan showed him the ledger, Miller's face went pale. "This is bad," Miller said. "This is really bad." "Will you arrest him?" Ethan asked. "I need more than a ledger. I need witnesses willing to testify in court." "You have 8 of them." Miller looked at the women gathered in his office, at their determined faces, at Maggie standing like a general at the front of her army. "All right," Miller said, "but you need to know something. Brennan will not go down easy, and neither will Blackwood." "Let them try," Ethan said. On their last night in Deadwood, Grace stood with Maggie on the porch of the boarding house. The street was quiet. Stars were coming out overhead. "Thank you," Grace said, "for everything you have done. You do not need to thank me. You are doing this for all of us." I am scared, Grace admitted. You should be. Scared means you are smart, but scared does not mean you run. It means you prepare. Grace nodded. Ethan has been teaching me to fight. Good, because Clayton is not going to give up. Men like him never do. I know. Maggie put her hand on Grace's shoulder. You are not the same woman who left here 4 months ago. You are stronger now, braver. Do not forget that when things get hard. I will try. And Grace, if things go bad, if Clayton wins, you run. You hear me? You get as far from here as you can and you start over. I am not running anymore. Then you fight, and you win, because we need you to. We all need you to. The ride back to the cabin should have taken 6 hours. They made it 4 hours before Clayton appeared. He came from the east with 4 riders, men Ethan did not recognize. Hired guns, the kind who would do anything for money and ask no questions. Ethan saw them first. His hand went to his rifle. Grace, we have company. Grace saw the riders blocking the trail ahead, saw Clayton in front. Her stomach turned to ice. What do we do? She asked. We talk first. Fight if we have to. Ethan dismounted slowly, hands visible, non-threatening, but his rifle was slung where he could grab it fast if needed. Clayton rode forward. He looked worse than Ethan remembered. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes, the look of a man who had not slept well in weeks. Grace, Clayton called. Time to come home. This is my home, Grace said. She stayed on her horse. Let Clayton see she was not afraid. The law says different. You belong to the Hartley family. You belong to me. Ethan stepped forward, put himself between Clayton and Grace's horse. She belongs to herself, and she is not going anywhere with you. One of the hired guns moved his hand toward his pistol. Ethan's rifle came up fast, aimed, ready. Do not, Ethan said quietly. The hired gun froze. Clayton's face flushed red. You think you can stop all of us? There are 5 of us, and 1 of you. 2 of us, Grace said. Her rifle was up now too, pointed at Clayton. You would shoot your own brother-in-law. You are not my brother, and you stopped being family when you tried to sell me. Clayton's horse shifted nervously, sensing the tension. I am trying to help you. You do not understand what Blackwood will do if I do not deliver you. That is your problem, Ethan said, not hers. He will kill me. You understand he will hunt me down and kill me. Then you should have thought about that before you gambled money you did not have. Clayton's face went white. How did you know about that? We know everything. About your debts, about Blackwood, about Brennan's scheme. And we have proof. One of the hired guns spoke up. Boss, you did not say nothing about proof. You said this was a simple pickup. Shut up, Clayton snapped. I am not shutting up. If there is proof of fraud, I am not getting involved. The hired gun started to turn his horse. Another followed. Stop, Clayton yelled. I am paying you to do a job. You are paying us $50 each, the first hired gun said. That is not enough to go up against the law, or against Wade. Look at him. That is a man who has killed before. You want to die for $50, you go ahead. I am done. The hired gun rode away. The other 3 looked at each other, looked at Ethan standing ready with his rifle, looked at Grace with her weapon trained on Clayton. This is bad business, the second hired gun said. He turned his horse and followed the first. The third and fourth guns hesitated, but only for a moment. Then they too rode off, leaving Clayton alone. Clayton sat on his horse, alone, facing Ethan and Grace. His hand hovered over his pistol, but he did not draw. This is not over, Clayton said. His voice was shaking. Yes, it is, Ethan replied. You come after Grace again, and I will not give you a chance to run. I will put you down like the coward you are. Do you understand me? Clayton swallowed hard. Blackwood will come for her, with more men. Let him try. You do not know what you are dealing with. He is not like me. He does not scare easy. Neither do I. Clayton stared at Ethan for a long moment, saw the absolute certainty in the other man's eyes, knew that if he drew his gun, he would die. He turned his horse and rode away. Fast, like he could not get away quick enough. Ethan watched him go, did not lower his rifle until Clayton was out of sight. Grace let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "You think he meant it about Blackwood coming?" "Yes. Men like that do not let debts go. If Clayton cannot deliver you, Blackwood will come himself." "How many men will he bring?" "As many as he thinks he needs. We should prepare for the worst." They rode the rest of the way to the cabin in silence, both knowing that the real fight was still ahead. 2 nights later there was a knock on the cabin door. Ethan answered with his rifle ready. It was Samuel the trapper. He looked worried. "Sorry to come so late," Samuel said, "but I heard something in Helena you need to know about." Ethan let him in, poured him coffee, waited while Samuel warmed his hands by the fire. "I was trading pelts up in Helena," Samuel said. "Heard talk about Harrison Blackwood, about how he is gathering men, a lot of men." "How many?" Ethan asked. 10, maybe more. Hard cases, the kind who do not ask questions and do not care who gets hurt." Grace felt her blood run cold. "Why so many?" "Because Blackwood is not just a loan shark," Samuel said. "He runs half the illegal operations in Helena territory. Gambling, prostitution, protection rackets. He has a reputation to protect. If word gets out that Clayton failed to deliver on a debt, Blackwood looks weak. He cannot allow that." "So this is not about Grace anymore," Ethan said. "It is about making an example. Clayton owes him $3,000. Blackwood told him to pay in cash or deliver the woman. Clayton tried and failed. So now Blackwood is coming to collect, and when he does, he will kill anyone who gets in his way." Ethan stood, paced to the window, looked out at the dark forest. "When 2 weeks, maybe less. He is gathering his men now. Once he has enough, he will come." After Samuel left, Grace sat at the table with her head in her hands. 10 men. How do we fight 10 men? We do not fight them head on. We make them not want to fight. How? We fortify, we prepare, we make attacking this cabin so costly that they decide it is not worth it. And if they decide it is worth it anyway, Ethan looked at her. His face was hard. Then we make them regret it. They had 10 days. Ethan used every minute. First, he reinforced the cabin. Additional shutters for the windows with firing slits cut into them. Iron bars across the doors. A second escape route through the roof if the tunnel was blocked. He built traps around the perimeter, bear traps hidden under snow, tripwires strung with bells, oil that could be lit on fire, anything that would slow attackers or give warning. "Make them think twice," Ethan said as he worked. "Make them see that taking this cabin will cost blood." Grace helped where she could, moving supplies, preparing ammunition, filling containers with water in case they were trapped inside for days. Ethan sent word to the few people he trusted. Samuel came back with 2 miners Ethan had helped in the past, not fighters, but men who owed him and were willing to stand witness if needed. Reverend Thomas from Hill City arrived with a wagon full of supplies, food, medicine, bandages. "I cannot fight," the Reverend said, "but I can help you survive after." "That is all we need," Ethan said. They stockpiled ammunition, counted rounds, made sure every gun was clean and ready. Ethan had 3 rifles and 2 pistols. Grace had Ann's rifle and the Colt .45 Ethan had given her. "We have maybe 200 rounds total," Ethan said. "Against 10 men that might not be enough. Then we make every shot count." Ethan taught Grace the layout of the defenses, where each trap was placed, how to trigger the oil fires, the positions to shoot from, the fall back points if they were overrun. "If they break through the front door, you go to the loft," Ethan said. "Fire down on them. I will hold the ground floor. What if they get past you? Then you go through the roof, down the rope we rigged, into the woods. You do not stop. You do not look back. You run. I told you, I am not leaving you. Grace. No. We fight together. We survive together. Or we die together. Those are the only options." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to be smart, Be practical. But he saw the look in her eyes and knew it was pointless. "All right," he said. "Together." On the 9th day, Ethan stood on the roof of the cabin and looked out at his preparations. Traps set, defenses ready, ammunition distributed. They were as prepared as they would ever be. He climbed down and found Grace in the cabin. She was checking her rifle, making sure everything was ready. "Tomorrow night," Ethan said. "That is when they will come." "How do you know?" "Because that is when I would come. Give us enough time to think we are safe, not enough time to let our guard down completely. Are we ready?" Ethan looked around the cabin, at the shuttered windows, the barred doors, the woman standing beside him with a rifle in her hands and fire in her eyes. "As ready as we will ever be." That night they did not sleep. They sat by the fire and waited, listening to the sounds of the forest, the wind, the creak of branches. Every noise could be the enemy approaching. Grace cleaned her rifle for the 3rd time. Her hands were steady, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. "You scared?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." "Were you scared in the war? Every single day?" "How did you deal with it?" "I remembered what I was fighting for, who I was protecting. That made the fear bearable." Grace looked at him. "What are you fighting for now?" Ethan met her eyes. "You. This cabin. The life we could have if we survive tomorrow. That is worth fighting for. More than anything I have fought for in my life." They sat in silence after that. As the night wore on and dawn approached, they both knew that whatever happened next would change everything. They came at midnight, just like Ethan predicted. The alarm bells rang first, soft jingling as someone tripped a wire, then louder as more bells were triggered. "They are here," Ethan said. He moved to his position by the front window. Grace went to the loft. They had practiced this, knew their roles. Through the shutters, Ethan could see shapes moving in the darkness. 10 men, maybe more. They approached carefully, professional. These were not farmers or miners. These were men who knew how to fight. "Wade." A voice called from the darkness, deep, commanding. "Blackwood. Send out the woman, and we leave you alone." Ethan did not answer, just watched, counted men, calculated angles. "You have 10 seconds," Blackwood shouted. "After that we burn you out." Ethan remained silent. "Have it your way." The first wave came fast, 4 men rushing the door. Ethan let them get close, waited until they were almost at the porch. Then he fired. The lead man went down with a bullet in his leg. The others scattered, dove for cover behind trees and rocks. Grace fired from the loft. Her shot hit a man in the shoulder. He screamed and fell. "Light the oil," Ethan called. Grace dropped a torch through the roof vent. It landed in the oil-soaked trench Ethan had dug around the cabin. The oil caught instantly. Flames shot up, creating a wall of fire between the cabin and the attackers. Horses screamed, men shouted. The smell of smoke and burning oil filled the air. But Blackwood's men did not run. They regrouped, came at the cabin from multiple directions at once. Ethan fired, reloaded, fired again. He hit 2 more men, wounded, not killed, but enough to slow them down. Grace was firing steadily from the loft, methodical, just like Ethan taught her. Pick a target, breathe, squeeze, move to the next. One of Blackwood's men threw a torch at the cabin. It bounced off the shutters and fell into the snow, did not catch. Another man tried to rush the door, stepped on a bear trap. The steel jaws clamped onto his leg. His screams were horrible. "Fall back," Blackwood shouted. "Regroup." The attackers retreated into the darkness, dragging their wounded with them. Ethan counted. They had hit 5 men, maybe 6. That left 4 or 5 still in the fight. "You all right?" Ethan called up to Grace. "Yes. You?" "Fine. Save your ammunition. They will come again." They did, 15 minutes later, this time with more coordination. 2 men providing covering fire while 4 others rushed different sides of the cabin at once. Ethan shot one through the window shutter. Grace got another. but two made it to the walls, started trying to pry the shutters off. Break through. Ethan grabbed his pistol, moved to the side wall, fired through a gap in the logs, hit one of the men point blank. The man fell. The second man got the shutter off, started to climb through the window. Grace shot him from above. He fell back out, clutching his chest, but the damage was done. The window was open, a way in. "Cover that window!" Ethan shouted. He grabbed a heavy table and shoved it against the opening, nailed boards across it. Outside, Blackwood was shouting orders, regrouping again. "How many left?" Grace asked. "Maybe 3, plus Blackwood." "Can we hold?" "We have to." The third assault came from 2 directions, front and back, coordinated, professional. The back door splintered under repeated hits from an axe. Ethan ran to defend it, fired through the breaking door, hit someone. The axe stopped, but at the front, 2 men broke through. One kicked in the weakened door. The other followed close behind. Ethan turned, raised his rifle, but he was too slow. The first man was already inside, moving fast. They collided, went down in a tangle of limbs. Ethan's rifle clattered away. The man pulled a knife, slashed at Ethan's face. Ethan blocked, punched. They rolled on the floor, fighting for position, for leverage, for life. The knife came up again. Ethan caught the man's wrist. They struggled. The blade inched closer to Ethan's throat. Then Grace was there. She jumped from the loft, landed on the second attacker who was raising his gun toward Ethan. They went down hard. Grace stabbed with her knife, just like Ethan taught her. Slash. Do not stab. She cut the man's arm, his gun hand. He dropped the pistol. Ethan got leverage on his opponent, twisted the knife hand. Bone snapped. The man screamed. Ethan grabbed the knife and drove it into the man's side. Not deep, but enough. The man went limp. Grace was still fighting. Her opponent was bigger, stronger. He got on top of her, hands going for her throat. Ethan grabbed the man's collar, hauled him off Grace, threw him against the wall, hit him once, twice, 3 times. The man collapsed. "You hurt," Ethan gasped. "No." Grace panted. "You cut on my ribs, not deep." They stood back to back in the ruined cabin. 2 bodies on the floor, blood on the walls, fire crackling outside. The door opened. Blackwood stepped through. He was a big man, 50 years old, scarred face, cold eyes. He held a pistol in each hand. "Impressive," Blackwood said, "but it ends here." He raised both pistols. Ethan dove, pushed Grace down. The guns fired. Bullets hit the wall where they had been standing. Ethan came up with his rifle, fired, but Blackwood was already moving. The shot missed. Blackwood fired again. Hit Ethan in the shoulder. Ethan spun, went down. "Ethan!" Grace screamed. Blackwood turned his guns toward her. "Your turn." Grace raised her rifle, but Blackwood was faster. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then Ethan rose from the floor, blood streaming down his arm, rifle in his good hand. He fired. The shot took Blackwood in the chest. Center mass, perfect placement. Blackwood looked down at the hole in his chest, looked up at Ethan, tried to raise his guns. Ethan fired again. Blackwood fell. His pistols clattered to the floor. He twitched once, then was still. Silence fell over the cabin. Outside someone was running, fleeing into the forest. The last of Blackwood's men, deciding that $3,000 was not worth dying for. Ethan lowered his rifle, swayed. Grace caught him before he fell. "You are hit," she said. "Shoulder, went through clean. You need to sit down." "Not yet. Need to make sure they are really gone." But even as he said it, Ethan's legs gave out. Grace lowered him to the floor, tore strips from her shirt to bandage the wound. Outside, the sound of horses fading into the distance, the crackle of dying fires, the wind through the trees. It was over. They had won. 2 days later, after Reverend Thomas had bandaged Ethan's shoulder and Samuel had helped them clean up the cabin, Clayton appeared. He came alone, on foot, looking like a man who had not slept in a week. His clothes were dirty, his face haggard. He carried a pistol, but it hung loose in his hand like he was not sure what to do with it. Ethan was on the porch, his arm in a sling but otherwise recovered. He saw Clayton approaching through the trees and stood. His good hand rested on his rifle. "That is far enough," Ethan called. Clayton stopped at the edge of the clearing. "I just want to talk." "Talk then." "Blackwood is dead, his men scattered. Word is spreading what happened here." And I am a dead man." Clayton's voice cracked. "You understand Blackwood's partners will come looking for someone to blame. They will find me." "That is not my problem." "Please." Clayton's gun hand started to rise, not aiming, just moving. "I need her. If I deliver Grace, maybe they will let me live." "She is not property to be delivered," Grace said. She stepped out onto the porch beside Ethan, her rifle in her hands. "I am a person, and I am done being afraid of men like you." Clayton's face twisted, anger and desperation warring. "You do not understand what you have done. You have ruined my life." "You ruined your own life," Ethan said. "By gambling money you did not have. By trying to sell a woman to cover your debts. You made your choices. Now live with them." "I cannot." Clayton raised his pistol, hands shaking. "I cannot live like this, running, hiding, waiting for them to find me." "Then turn yourself in," Grace said. "Tell the law everything, about Brennan, about Blackwood. Maybe they will protect you." "The law?" Clayton laughed. It was a bitter sound. "The law does not protect men like me. I am already dead. I just have not fallen down yet." He aimed the pistol at Grace, his finger on the trigger. Ethan moved, stepped in front of Grace. His rifle came up. "Clayton," Ethan said quietly, "do not do this. You pull that trigger, and you die. Right here, right now. Is that what you want?" Clayton's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the gun. Tears ran down his face. "I did not want this. I just needed money, that is all. I never wanted to hurt anyone." "But you did hurt people," Grace said. Her voice was sad, not angry, just sad. "You hurt me. You hurt all those women Brennan sold. You cannot undo that." "I know." Clayton's gun hand dropped. He fell to his knees in the snow, sobbing. "I know, and I am sorry. God help me. I am sorry." Ethan looked at Grace, silently asking what she wanted to do. Grace stepped forward, walked down off the porch, stood in front of Clayton, her rifle pointed at the ground. "Go," she said. "Get as far from here as you can. Start over. Be better. They will find me. Maybe, maybe not. But you have a chance. Use it." Clayton looked up at her. At the woman he had tried to sell like livestock, the woman who was now showing him mercy he did not deserve. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you let me go?" "Because revenge does not heal anything," Grace said, "and because someone once showed me mercy when I did not deserve it. I am just passing it forward." Clayton stood slowly, holstered his pistol, looked at Ethan, at Grace, at the cabin they had defended. "I do not deserve this," he said. "No," Grace agreed. "You do not. But neither did I deserve what Brennan tried to do to me. Life is not about deserving. It is about choices. Make better ones." Clayton nodded, turned, walked away into the forest. They watched him go. Neither of them felt victorious, just tired. "You think we will see him again?" Ethan asked. "No," Grace said. "I think he will run until he cannot run anymore. Then he will either start over or he will die. Either way, he is not our problem anymore." They went back into the cabin, closed the door, began the work of rebuilding what had been damaged in the fight. 2 weeks later, Ethan and Grace rode into Deadwood. Ethan's shoulder was healed enough to travel, the cabin was repaired, and they had unfinished business. Brennan was in his usual spot at his usual table. His face went white when he saw them walk through the door. "You are supposed to be dead," Brennan said. "Disappointed?" Ethan asked. Behind them Maggie entered with the 8 women. They stood in a line behind Grace like soldiers at attention. Sheriff Miller came in next. He looked nervous but determined. "Victor Brennan, I have a warrant for your arrest." "On what charges?" Brennan demanded. Fraud, human trafficking, conspiracy. Take your pick. Brennan stood. His chair scraped the floor. You cannot prove any of that. Grace stepped forward, dropped the ledger on his table. This proves it. Your own handwriting. 12 women, 12 fraudulent debts, 12 sales. Brennan stared at the ledger. His face went from white to red. Where did you get that? Does not matter. What matters is what it says. Men in the saloon were gathering closer now, listening, whispering, words spreading fast through Deadwood. Even if that is real, Brennan said, this is Deadwood. The law here is what I say it is. Not anymore, a voice said from the door. A U.S. Marshal stepped in, tall, gray-haired, star on his chest. Victor Brennan, I am Marshal James Harding. I have authority from the Dakota Territory government to arrest you for violations of the 13th Amendment. Brennan's eyes went wide. The what? You have been buying and selling people, Mr. Brennan. That is slavery, and slavery is illegal in the United States. They are not slaves. They are debtors. According to this ledger, the marshal said, picking it up, you forged debt amounts and sold women against their will. That fits the legal definition of human trafficking, which is slavery under another name. Brennan looked around the room, looking for allies, looking for someone to back him up. But the men who had laughed when he sold women were silent now, because this was serious, federal serious. You have no proof, Brennan said, but his voice was weak. I have 8 witnesses ready to testify, the marshal said. I have your ledger, and I have testimony from one of Blackwood's men who survived the fight at Wade's cabin. He told us everything about your operation. Brennan made one last desperate move. He grabbed a knife from his belt and lunged at Grace. Ethan stepped between them, took the knife slash across his good arm. Then he punched Brennan, once, hard, right on the jaw. Brennan went down like a felled tree. The marshal pulled out handcuffs. Add assault with a deadly weapon to the charges. As they dragged Brennan away, Grace turned to face the crowd that had gathered. Every man who had been in the saloon that night months ago when she stood in the corner waiting to be sold. You all watched, Grace said. Her voice was clear, strong, carrying to every corner of the room. You watched Brennan sell women like cattle, and you did nothing. Some of you laughed. Some of you bit on us. The men looked ashamed, looked at their feet. But Grace was not done. I want you to remember this, she continued. Remember that the woman you thought was weak fought back. Remember that we are not property. We are not things to be bought and sold. We are people, and we have power. Power to say no, power to fight, power to win. She looked at the women standing with her, at Maggie, at Mary and Elizabeth and all the others. We won, Grace said, not because men saved us, but because we saved ourselves. We stood together, we fought back, and we won. The women broke into applause. It started with Maggie, then spread. Even some of the men joined in, applauding these women who had refused to be victims. Grace took Ethan's hand. They walked out of the saloon together, into the sunlight, into freedom. Behind them, Maggie called out, We are forming a protection society. Any woman who needs help, any woman being exploited, you come to us. We take care of our own now. The women cheered, and in that moment something changed in Deadwood. Not everything, not overnight, but a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into something that mattered. Spring came to the Black Hills. Snow melted. Creeks ran full and fast. Green shoots pushed up through the earth. The world was renewing itself. Ethan and Grace stood on the ridge above the cabin, looking down at the place they had defended, the place they had bled for, the place that had become home. The contract is finished, Ethan said. More than finished. You have been here almost 6 months. You are free to go whenever you want. Grace looked at him. Is that what you want? For me to go? No. But what I want is not what matters. What matters is what you want. I want to stay. Are you sure? Because you have options now. Maggie would take you in. You could start over somewhere else, somewhere safer. Grace turned to face him fully, took both his hands in hers. Ethan weighed. I am staying because I choose to. Not because of a contract, not because I owe you, not because I am afraid to leave, but because I love you. Ethan's breath caught. Grace. I love you, she said again. I love your strength and your honor. I love the way you kept your word, even when it would have been easier to break it. I love that you taught me to be strong instead of just protecting me. I love this cabin and this mountain and this life we have built together. I am not an easy man to love, Ethan said. I have ghosts, nightmares, days when the grief is still so heavy I can barely move. I know. I have my own ghosts. But maybe together we can carry them. Maybe together we can heal. Ethan pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first night when you kept watch while I slept, when you showed me I could trust again. Then marry me, Grace said, properly, with flowers and a church and everyone knowing that we chose each other freely. Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They kissed. Standing on the ridge with the wind blowing and the sun shining and the whole world spread out before them. Below the cabin waited, their home, their sanctuary, the place where two broken people had learned to be whole again, 3 years later. The cabin had grown, 2 new rooms added, a garden thriving in the clearing, chickens in a coop, a sign hanging from a post that read, Wade Haven. Grace stood in the garden, her hands in the soil, planting seeds for the summer crop. She was 29 now, stronger than she had ever been. Her face was tanned from working outside, her hands were calloused but capable. Ethan was on the roof, repairing shingles damaged in the winter storms. At 39 he had more gray in his beard, more lines around his eyes, but he looked happy, truly happy for the first time since Anne and Rose died. 3 women lived in the cabin with them now, recent arrivals from Deadwood, widows escaping Brennan's successor who had tried to continue the scheme until Maggie's Protection Society shut him down. The women worked in the garden with Grace, learning, healing, preparing for the day when they would be strong enough to start over on their own. A rider approached. It was Samuel. He delivered mail once a month now, brought news from Deadwood and Hill City and Helena. Letter from Maggie, Samuel said. He handed Grace an envelope. Grace read it aloud. Dear Grace and Ethan. The Protection Society now has 200 members. Brennan's trial changed everything. 47 women have been freed from fraudulent contracts across Dakota Territory. We have helped 18 women start new lives. 2 have started businesses. 1 is running for local office. Your cabin has become a symbol, proof that we can fight back and win. Sending 3 more women to you next week. They need what you offer. Safety, training, hope. Thank you for starting this. Thank you for showing us the way. With love and gratitude, Maggie. Grace folded the letter, looked up at Ethan on the roof. He had stopped working, was watching her with that soft expression he got sometimes, the look that said he could not believe his luck, that this woman had chosen him. That evening, after the women had gone to bed and the cabin was quiet, Grace and Ethan sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and red. Do you ever think about Deadwood? Ethan asked. Sometimes, but not with fear anymore, with pride. We changed things there. You changed things. You gave those women courage. We did it together. Ethan put his arm around her, drew her close. I have something to tell you. What? I have been thinking about the future, about what we are building here. And I think we should expand, build more rooms, help more women, make this place into something that lasts, a real sanctuary. Grace smiled. I think that is a wonderful idea, but I have something to tell you too. What is it? Grace took his hand, placed it on her belly. We are going to need at least 1 more room, for 3 people instead of 2. Ethan went very still, his hand spread across her stomach, understanding dawning on his face. You mean, yes, we are going to have a baby. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He pulled Grace into his arms, held her tight. I am scared, he whispered. So am I. I lost a family before. I do not think I could survive losing another. You will not lose us. We are strong. We are survivors. All of us." Ethan held her and let himself cry, not from sadness, but from joy, from hope, from the possibility of a future he thought he had lost forever. "Anne and Rose would be happy for you," Grace said softly. "I know. I can feel it. They would have loved you." They sat together as the sun set, as the stars came out, as the world turned dark and then light again. And somewhere in the distance the sound of women's voices, laughing, talking, planning their futures. The cabin in the mountains had become more than a home. It had become a refuge, a symbol, a place where broken people came to heal and strong people came to help others find their strength. Ethan Wade looked at his wife, at the life they had built, at the legacy they were creating. He had come to Deadwood to sell furs and buy ammunition. He had planned to leave before dawn, but then he saw a woman who needed help, and he made a choice. That choice changed everything. Some men are measured by the battles they win, others by the wealth they accumulate, but Ethan knew he would be measured by something different, by the women he saved, by the home he built, by the family he protected, by the legacy he left behind, and that was enough. For any man, that was more than enough. Grace rested her head on his shoulder, whispered, "I love you, Ethan Wade. I love you too, Grace Wade, every single day for the rest of my life." They sat together as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other in the darkness, who had fought for the right to be together, who had built something worth protecting. In the cabin behind them the women slept peacefully, safe, protected, free. And in the months and years to come, more would arrive, more would heal, more would learn to be strong. The legacy would continue, the work would go on. The fight for justice and dignity and the simple right to choose your own life would never end. But tonight Ethan and Grace simply held each other, and that was enough. That was everything.